Well, the Republican Party in Washington has moved on to their next accusation against Biden. And I was honestly somewhat hesitant to even do this segment because in a way it feels like I'm playing into the very game that they're setting up here. But for that reason, I want to use this most recent right-wing freakout about Biden as an opportunity to discuss and break down what the game is and how what is taking place right now is yet another example of it. This will all make more sense as we dive into the specifics. So the overarching headline is Republicans are saying, James Comer, Chuck Grassley specifically, that they have a whistleblower who's alleging Biden was involved in a bribery scheme with a foreign national while he was vice president. And because that would be a crime, let me just caveat, as I always do, this entire story by saying, if in some unlikely situation, this is the one example after seemingly hundreds of accusations by conservatives of crimes against Biden, after all these accusations have been made and countless times we've been told that this time the evidence is all going to be revealed and we're going to prove he committed a crime or did all these different terrible things. And this time it actually happens, even though all those other times it didn't. Yes, just like anyone else, Biden should be subject to the law. If he actually were to have committed crimes, he should, as I've said with the documents investigation, be investigated, held accountable legally. But with the Republicans' track record on this, it's very, very unlikely that's going to happen. So there's my caveat. With all that being said, let me walk through the much more likely game that's being played here. So first, to understand the game that's being played, you have to understand the accusation from James Comer and Chuck Grassley, which honestly, there isn't much to really understand because even they seem confused about the narrative that they're pushing. But here's a little bit about this from CBS News. Two top congressional Republicans say they want to know what, if any, information the FBI has about an alleged bribery scheme involving President Joe Biden, while the White House accuses the lawmakers of an unfounded political attack. House Oversight and Accountability Chairman James Comer and Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa say a whistleblower has provided information about the alleged scheme, and they have issued a subpoena to FBI Director Christopher Wray, demanding a document that they say contains information about the allegation. And then it walks through excerpts from this allegation, the document. So essentially what Republicans have been doing since they took over the House of Representatives is what I'll refer to as fabricating headlines, okay? Because they feel, apparently, the actual headlines responding to Biden's actual presidency aren't damaging enough. So they have to create more dramatic ones. They have to make an accusation and make it loudly enough to get the news to report on what is a newsworthy event, one prominent political figure accusing another of impropriety, a crime, and they have won if enough people can just see the headline. James Comer alleges Biden did this. And then a lot of people won't read down a few sentences to find out that the claim is unsubstantiated. So we've seen this for sure from the Weaponization Committee trying to prove the federal government has been weaponized against conservatives, where the job of James Comer and Jim Jordan is not to provide evidence that will be damaging to Biden. It's instead to scream enough about a baseless claim so that it gets into the headlines. And that allows them to get blows against Biden politically. And if you're really loud about the accusation and you say, we're going to investigate it, but later on you're real quiet about the fact that you attempted to investigate it and couldn't find any evidence, then a lot of people are going to be left with false perceptions of what is true. And so let me illustrate this point by using the weaponization subcommittee as an example. And then we'll connect it back, of course, to this most recent accusation. We heard from House Republicans that, oh my goodness, we have all of these bombshell testimonies prepared and whistleblowers out the wazoo who are going to prove that Biden has led in weaponizing the federal government, and the federal government is being weaponized against conservatives. But then, as the New York Times writes, the roster of witnesses whose interviews and statements are detailed in a 316-page report compiled by Democrats that was obtained by the New York Times suggests that Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, the chairman of the panel, has so far relied on people who do not meet the definition of a whistleblower and who have engaged in partisan conduct that calls into question their credibility. And it raises questions about whether Republicans who have said that investigating the Biden administration is a top goal will be able to deliver on their ambitious plans to uncover misdeeds at the highest levels. Quote, each endorses an alarming series of conspiracy theories talking about the individuals coming forward here, brought by Jim Jordan and company, related to the January 6th Capitol attack, the COVID vaccine, and the validity of the 2020 election. Democrats wrote in the heavily footnoted report, which cites scores of statements made by the witnesses. One has called repeatedly for the dismantling of the FBI, and others suggested that it would be better for Americans to die than to have any kind of domestic intelligence program. My goodness. The report also notes that the men are tied to far-right Republican operatives and former Trump administration officials who have an interest in promoting false claims about the January 6th attack and the Biden administration while working to defend Mr. Trump, who is seeking a second term. And then it focuses in on the document centers on three men who have been interviewed by the panel's investigators. George Hill, a retired FBI supervisory intelligence analyst from the Bureau's Boston field office, Stephen Friend, a former special agent who worked in the Daytona Beach office, and Garrett O'Boyle, a special agent from the field office in Wichita, Kansas, who has been suspended. And then, let's see, there was one just truly, it's outlining kind of the different, the different things that these individuals have said. Mr. O'Boyle and Mr. Friend both testified that they had received financial support from Kash Patel, a Trump loyalist and former high-ranking official in the former president's administration. And then it goes on, but you get the point. The whistleblowers aren't really credible whistleblowers at all. They're just people who have a political bias, who happen to have had or have a particular title at one point, and then they're used, their testimonies weaponized to push unsubstantiated claims. And so it has to be remembered that simply finding someone who is willing to make an accusation doesn't make them a credible whistleblower. Evidence matters. Even current FBI agents and former FBI agents, as was noted in that article, can be bought into some wacky stuff. And this is very much highlighted by this. A former FBI supervisory, this is from CNN, special agent has been arrested on charges related to the January 6, 2021 U.S. Capitol attack, according to court records. So a former supervisory special agent in the FBI was at the Capitol. He was saying, kill them about law enforcement officers, just completely bonkers. So if a former FBI supervisor can turn into someone involved in an insurrection, yeah, you can find someone, as the previous article noted, who used to be in the FBI, especially in this current partisan reality, who was willing to say, oh yeah, it's weaponized against dear leader Trump. And the same applies for whoever the alleged whistleblower is in this most recent story. And that's why, yes, names and titles matter, but also evidence. And that is what time and time again Republicans have been incapable of bringing forward. And that's why hearing after hearing has gone worse for them than anyone could have imagined. So bad, by the way, as we've talked about in the past, that even a Fox News propagandist had this to say about all of this.
These goons with subpoenas? Where are the bombshells? Have the investigations even started? How about what did you know and when did you know it? It's a good question. Where are the smoking gun documents?
where are the bombshells? If even Jesse Waters is wondering, hey, where's all the bombshells we were promised by the right wing, by Republicans in the House of Representatives? You're not doing a good job pushing your dishonest narrative if even he can't buy into it. So, or he's pushing it too. He's just saying, we want some stuff. You got to give us some fake bombshells to talk about. You're not even doing that. But we're experiencing here, I suspect, another round of this game. James Comer and Chuck Grassley have found someone maybe to say they have evidence of some nebulous bribery plot between Biden and a foreign national. No evidence is provided. They say that's because we're working to provide the evidence now. We're going to. A bunch of people will hear that. Oh, it's being investigated. Gosh, credible accusation. My goodness. And then no one reads the article a month from now that says all of this fell apart for Comer and Grassley. And then the cycle continues and they move on to a new thing. I have more to say on this, actually. I know this is going to be kind of a long segment, but first I want to look at a Midas Touch compilation that was put together of different people who are very concerned about these accusations, pushing them, but then admitting they know nothing about it and have no evidence at this point in time.
Wondering exactly what this is all about. According to a press release that was sent out by James Comer's office, it says the information provided by a whistleblower raises concerns that then Vice President Biden allegedly engaged in a bribery scheme. Does this have to do with Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings in Ukraine or China, or is it something else?
Well, I guess basically we've got to wait to see what the document exactly says.
It's a very serious allegation against the then vice president.
It is a very serious allegation. I wish I could say that I knew it was true or untrue.
But this is something new. Do you have any information on that?
I do not. I don't have any information on what the whistleblowers has alleged in terms of the specific substantive allegations.
So they admit, I guess to their credit, that at this point in time, there's just no evidence to the accusations being made other than possibly a person alleging it. But if you tune into the coverage on these right-wing networks, heavily implying, we'll say, that it indeed happened. And that once again emphasizes the phenomenon at play here that we talk about a lot, the more zoomed out picture with Republicans. Distraction politics. They ran in the midterms on solving inflation and gas prices and addressing kitchen table issues, and then have spent all their time with these hearings about Twitter and talking about Hunter Biden and the weaponization and a parents' Bill of Rights bill that would force teachers to out their students involuntarily, by the way, to their parents. But why? Why do they focus 24/7 on trying to create stories about Biden and Hunter Biden and all these different things? Because that will distract from the fact that when rubber meets the road, as a governing party, they're not benefiting the American people. Maybe if we're talking about this most recent story from Republicans, we won't be talking about the fact that they're threatening to throw us into an economic catastrophe by not raising the debt ceiling. Why? So that they can leverage cuts to food stamps, Medicaid, and other discretionary spending cuts that would do some serious damage across the board, including impacting veterans. And as I said before, if Biden, despite the fact that for years now, no evidence of these accusations against him has actually been brought forward, if all of a sudden evidence was brought forward and he was caught up in some criminal enterprise, investigate him, prosecute him. And if there's evidence there, convict him of a crime. But what we've observed in the real world day after day is, while far from perfect, Biden and the Democrats have actually been putting forward and implementing policies that in many cases significantly benefit the lives of Americans, while Republicans are doing the exact opposite. And as I said, risking throwing us into an economic disaster while trying to get the spending cuts that they want. So yeah, I guess if that was what I was up to as a governing party, I'd also want to distract by talking about, as my goodness, Marjorie Greene was the other day, Hunter Biden on Pornhub or something that she was concerned with. Distract with made up problems so that you don't have to act with actual solutions. Let me know what you think of all this on Twitter. Luke P. Beasley is where you can find me.